So, in spite of the government shutdown and all, I am going to be going on a quick trip this next week, a holiday and all. Anyway, I've got to go down to Florida. So anybody who's going to be coming for course next Tuesday, it's actually going to be done via YouTube. So I'm actually going to try and tape this one tonight and put it on. So anybody in this section.
You'll be back to Florida next week.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, I'll be back on Wednesday, actually. But that's the way it's going to work. All right. Whoops. So what we're going to talk about tonight is, well, we're going to be on day 7 here, and it's going to be capacity primarily. Does anybody have any questions before we get started? Capacity has to do with being able to produce the number of items that you need in terms of production, supplementing whatever design you came up with. You remember from the first couple days we saw that that chart that showed that there was a product life cycle. Remember that? And if you can have a product life cycle, you've got to be able to anticipate having the capacity when needed. So what it means is on most products, there's a very short time frame that you have in terms of profitability. So you got to be on top of it. And so your capacity, you not only have to have the capacity there, but you have to have done a pretty good estimate to make sure that works out. Let me see if I can get this thing squared away just a little bit. So, the throughput through the facility, and that's what you can receive or produce in a certain period of time. So, we have the planning cycle, as you can see. They talk about different cycles, like I said before. Short-range planning is usually inside of 3 months. Typically, intermediate-range planning starts at 3 months, can go out to either a year or 3 years, depending on how they want to do it. And then typically, long-range planning is about 3 years. So the significant part about this is you can make different decisions at different points, depending on where you sit. For example, if you want to increase capacity through the use of facilities, you want to build a new factory, whatever, you're looking at long-range planning. You can't just do that overnight. In the interim type things, those intermediate type things, you can subcontract, and you can achieve additional capacity by basically hiring that out. But that's dangerous, because what's real dangerous about that is, number one, your name is still going to be on the product if we're doing this in a manufacturing sense. And you want to assure that they've got sufficient quality as well. So everything that makes this subcontractor a perfect candidate also makes them a perfect competitor. So you may go, man, business is booming, we're going to bring in somebody else, and guess what? That somebody else may decide to stay, and now you may introduce some competition in there. Or they may put out a crummy product, and your reputation's diminished a bit. So a lot of problems with subcontracting, but it's done. Add personnel, build or use inventory. Those again fall in the intermediate stage. You can do some more hiring, but as we'll talk about in the second half of tonight, personnel issues that is real trouble in terms of, it's far easier to manage machines than it is people. People will and basically can punish you if they're abused. And so trying to surge to cover, situations with personnel, or hiring, firing people, or training them, all those things can be problematic. You're looking at me like I'm saying people are bad. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if you work a machine 24 hours a day, yeah, the machine may break. But you work a person like that, and you wish you had a broken machine. Because when you have people that are angry, it will impact you in terms of cost and everything else. HR stuff is more complex than, anybody here working in a restaurant, food service type stuff? restaurants, one of the primary reasons they go out of business is because of the personnel issues. It's a lot of work to keep everybody, kind of going on the same thing, same schedule. If I came in tonight and I said, well, rather than go on YouTube, we're going to go ahead and do that lecture on Sunday. There'd probably be, maybe a few people would be all right with it, but largely it'd be a mutiny. And then you get further along in your life, you all are a fairly young crowd, you get commitments with family and other things, and you get even more inflexible. So personnel, trying to make up your slack with personnel it's fraught with problems. People work best when they have some uniformity. People don't like to be, talk of layoffs is not good. It not only affects the person getting laid off, but it affects the whole staff. So I've been in those sorts of situations, and it has an adverse effect on the entire organization. Okay, short range, you can do what I was talking about in terms of scheduling jobs, scheduling personnel, allocating machinery. So again, you can make some changes, but if you all of a sudden say, hey, for the next 2 months we're going to be working constant overtime, yeah, some people may look forward to that, and other folks may go, no way. And now with the situation that's emerging where there's an emphasis or effort by a lot of companies to get employees under 30 hours a week, because if you switch people's hours like that, there's different requirements upon the employer to provide benefits. You may not be able to financially because it's going to change your entire structure, or at least you don't want to be adding people onto healthcare or taking them off. It's just going to be a lot of issues. But anyway, we'll see how that whole situation plays out. Okay, so that's capacity. Okay, when you're talking about capacity, you have a couple different measures. You have what they call design and effective capacity. So design capacity is maximum theoretical. So again, keep in mind when you're saying, design, theoretical, those are not, those are pretty strict engineering type terms that the absolute maximum you can get through that unit. And you get to effective, and it's, a little friendlier terminology in there. Firm expects to achieve given current operating constraints. So that's more realistic. And it's not often lower than design capacity. It's just about always lower than design capacity. So if we look at it, you have two different measures. Utilization refers to percent of design capacity, and then efficiency refers to percent of effective capacity. Okay, so it's two different math problems. Actual output divided by design capacity, or actual output divided by effective capacity. So this will make a little bit more sense. A bakery making 148,000 rolls, so nearly 150,000. Effective capacity is 175,000. And then design capacity is 12,000 rolls per hour. And then the bakery goes 7 days a week, 3 8-hour shifts. So design capacity, you could get 200,000 rolls out of that thing for a short time, because there's absolutely no time in there. It's design capacity. It's theoretical. There's no time for maintenance. There's no time for any slack. Anything. It's a design capacity. It's what could this thing actually do going full tilt. But machines, people, they don't work that way. So it's not really an effective measure. You never want to be measured against design capacity, theoretical capacity, because that's not realistic. What is realistic is effective capacity. So effective capacity deals with utilization. Here, they're doing utilization in this case. This is going to be measured against design. Bless you. So utilization here, they're saying 73.4%. Doesn't sound great. Because what you're doing to get that utilization is you're using the actual output divided by the theoretical output. So 73%, you're working pretty hard, and it says you're only doing 73% job. Doesn't sound very good. But when measured on efficiency, this is the realistic thing that takes into account constraints. 148 divided by 175 gives you nearly 85%. So anyway, different ways to measure capacity in terms of performance. Okay, capacity considerations. Yeah, you need to forecast demand accurately. So that's where this forecasting we're talking about is critical, because you're going to be making decisions. You know, it's not, oh yeah, did we meet the numbers, did we not meet the numbers? No, this could be, we have enough capacity to produce enough units for that thing that's in demand. And oh, by the way, the thing that we're producing, you know, might be some sort of technology, and it's you know, perishable. And this is our one chance to sell all these products, and we can't produce them. So that's why a forecast is accurate. By the same token, you know, you've had this huge facility, and you don't have any sales to support it. That's not good either. So that forecasts need to be accurate. Understand the technology and capacity increments. So it's going to change. The capacity increment in the technology is going to, you know, the machinery that it takes to produce a certain level of capacity is going to be different than another type. And then the optimum operating level, there's going to be a certain efficiency, a certain level that's going to be more efficient than others. And then build for change. If you can, you know, you would allow some flexibility in terms of change. Now you're going to see later in class, though, you know, it seems like Toyota and other folks go against this because they intentionally build their factories small because they don't want any storage taking place in there. They only want operations. So it doesn't mean, in terms of build for change, it doesn't mean build necessarily a bigger factory, but it means build a more flexible kind of factory. So modular equipment or you know, multi-purpose type equipment. Okay, economies and diseconomies of scale. We're all used to economies of scale. You know, generally things get cheaper the more you make. You know, if you're down there on the low end of the scale, you've got this hotel, bed only motel, 25 rooms. Well, do you still need someone at the front desk? Do you still need, you know, housekeeping? Do you still need this? You don't really have enough rooms that are generating enough income. There's going to be some sort of sweet spot there. And in this case, they're saying 50 rooms would cover those costs, yet still be able to be filled. If you get out in this particular situation, they're saying 75 rooms, the likelihood of that thing ever being filled is probably pretty slim in this case. But, you know, stuff, furniture, you know, bedding, all that stuff still kind of depreciating and still requiring heat and all the rest of that. So you don't want to build something too big. So economies of scale and then diseconomies of scale if things get too large. Managing demand. So this is how you adjust. You know, you did your forecast, but you're a bit off. So you can do certain things, you know, curtail demand by raising prices, scheduling longer lead times. Yeah, is this, you know, a good thing for the customers? You know, basically, if you go to the gas station and you know that there's some sort of gas shortage, and all of a sudden they want to charge you $4.50, you know, you as the customer are going to be pretty upset. You know, I can tell you this week, a strange situation. All my puppies are gone, right? So I sold all the puppies, I'm flush with cash. Cool, I can go buy something, right? Well, guess what? Hay this year is all screwed up. They're down to like 20% yield. So I've got a good farmer that I deal with out in the valley, and he gave me a heads up and said, you need to get your hay now, or else you're going to be in trouble. So he still sold it to me for the same price, but he said, you got to come get it now. If he would have said, yeah, I'm going to run out of hay, and oh, by the way, for everything I got left, because I know people are going to want it, because it is going to get ugly around next June before they get the first cutting, and hay's at an all-time low, and people are, you know, their pets are starting to get a little hungry. Anyway, you could sell hay for a lot more. So anyway, he sold me all I needed to get me through till next July, but now I got this big wet haystack in my yard. But anyway, that's how you can fix that first level of demand. Now, capacity exceeds demand. Now you got problems. You've overproduced, you know, and this is where you stimulate the market. Variety of ways you can do that, but advertising, sales, those kinds of things. or product changes, which would be improvements. You'd have to make a judgment call whether that product change is really going to, you know, sell more. But if there's something easy, yeah, by all means. And then seasonal demands. This is like this sort of nirvana type thing where they always use this example of the snow machine and the jet ski. And, you know, hey, you can level your production by selling both those products. It kind of sort of works. I mean, you see it here in Alaska especially, you know. Most of your dump truck guys, they're also snow removal guys. So they're doing landscaping, contracting stuff in the summer, they're doing snow removal in the winter. You know, and or other folks, there's certain folks that, you know, say fishermen or whatever, that are like, yeah, I'm going to work my butt off during the season, but then I get the kickback. And that's the kind of lifestyle they bought into, and that's what they like, and that's what they're accustomed to. You couldn't do that in a normal, you know, there people gravitate to that work environment because of that. You couldn't just say, hey, guess what, we're just going to do this from now on, and, you know, I don't know, you're working at Kohl's or Lowe's or something, and you're going to say, yeah, you guys are not going to be employed for these months, and we're going to work, you know, 24/7, these other, you know, who's going to take care of the kids and all that. It would not be, for most people, it wouldn't work out. So anyway, there's ways to do that. Again, there's their pattern. If you could work that out, that's great. But I think there's a lot more, what do you call, snow machines being sold than jet skis. I've had a bunch of jet skis, and they're kind of fun at first, but then they're kind of boring unless you're like on the ocean or something. It's just like, okay, what are we going to do? Around the circles. Anyway, again, that's what they're showing, that those two will balance out. Those curves will kind of go together. I had to sell it in Germany. They required me to take a safety course in German. It was like, Germany, they had rules for everything, and it was just, it was so over the top that you had to. Okay, tactics for matching capacity to demand. So, staffing changes. So now we're back to that HR thing. You know, it sounds easy. Just make some staffing changes. Well, again, we're talking about people here. We're talking about people that either need to be layered off or hired and then maybe fired when this capacity changes. You know, you want some stability in those issues. Adjusting equipment, purchasing additional equipment, or selling or leasing existing equipment. You know, those are options. Again, you know, there's a bit of expense involved there. Improving the process to increase throughput. Well, you should do that anyway. I mean, I'm not really sure why that capacity thing would be there. If it's possible to do more with less to increase the productivity, then that should have already been done. Redesigning products to facilitate more throughput, again, kind of a no-brainer. Adding process flexibility, and then closing facilities if you're just going, got too many. Again, you know, it depends on the situation, but you do have options to match those two items. Okay, so bottlenecks are just what they sound like. If you're trying to achieve a certain amount of capacity and you just can't get there because of some limiting factor, that limiting factor in a production sense is probably the bottleneck, right? So again, you know, you figure out, okay, this, you know, process can only produce so many units. And why is that? Well, because this one machine is whatever. That machine is the bottleneck. So you'd identify that bottleneck, and you know, by definition, it has the lowest effective capacity in the system. So, how do you know, eliminate or reduce the impact of bottleneck? Increasing the capacity of non-bottleneck. Yeah, what they're saying there on that third bullet is, if you've got a bottleneck and you add all these other machines somewhere outside of the bottleneck and don't touch the bottleneck, then you've just wasted a bunch of time and money. Again, this is you know, it all kind of comes back almost to critical path if you understood that. The bottleneck is the critical part of the system. So, increase the capacity of the bottleneck will increase the whole system. So fix that, you know, put two machines where one was, whatever, but identifying the bottleneck is the main part, and then moving on. Break-even analysis. Okay, the way you figure out this sort of break-even analysis and where we showed like the economies of scale, diseconomies of scale, we start dealing with fixed costs and variable costs, okay? Fixed costs, as you know, depreciation, real estate, things like that. Variable costs, those are typically the things that go into the product. So, the individual labor, materials, the portion of utilities. So, not all labor would truly be a variable cost. Say go back to that hotel example. The person at the front desk, you're always going to need one of those. So, they're almost a fixed cost. The housekeepers, the more rooms you add on, the more housekeepers you need. So they become variable. But anyway, in the true sense of the word, they're done it this way. And contribution is the difference between selling price and variable cost. So, how much it's contributing to cover those fixed costs. And, as you would expect, if you're doing real low production, you're losing money. And in a world where you don't have diseconomies of scale, the more you make, the more money you're making. Now again, you don't want to be anywhere near this break-even point. You want to be way to the right of it. I mean, you're not in business to be getting by. You're in business to be, able to not only pay your employees and all that, but reinvest in the company, come up with new products, all that kind of stuff. Break-even analysis. This is just a simple break-even analysis. Again, we won't really work through these equations. They look more, they're really not that complex, Total revenue equals total cost. That's where the break-even is. And then you can do that to piece of X, where that's the price, fixed cost plus variable cost times the number of units you're producing. Anyway, you can do the math and give yourself a break-even point. Not too complex. And there you go. So they're saying 10,000 fixed cost, $1.50 is the labor input, 75 is the material, $4. Wow, just like Otto did that. And anyway, it tells you a break-even point of 5,700 units. So again, that's where, the minimum point. You're at least not losing money, but you're not making a dime yet. So that's why you don't want to, linger at that break-even point. You want to go well to the right of it. Now, again, if you have a bunch of products, same equation, but just, a summation on there for the multiple products. That was the first part. We're going to keep going, though, because we've got more time to be spent in the second part. Any questions on that? There were some capacity questions we had from the previous chapter, but I think we got most of that squared away. Okay. Now we're going to talk about human resource strategy. So anyway, I didn't mean to gloss over any part of capacity. There were some folks somebody sent me an email regarding capacity. They had a question on it or thought we had skipped over part of it. Anybody? No? Okay. Human resources. Like I said, if you haven't already experienced it, managing people is complex. I mean, it is, it can be very rewarding. It's the reason most people, other than money, do work. I mean, there's a certain sense of going to work, and if it's a good place you enjoy, there's a lot to be gained from working with a group of people. But from this standpoint, we're talking about the management part and utilizing people efficiently and also taking care of them. And in essence, for people to be managed efficiently, they have to be taken care of, or else you will generate problems. So, people should be effectively utilized within the constraints of the operation management decision. People should have a reasonable quality of work life in an atmosphere of mutual commitment and trust. So, these things can get, really screwed up now and then. Rumors, things like that can happen, and sometimes you think, what would be an incentive? I mean, probably one of the worst case incentives, this was a long time ago, but in the Navy, they had a deal where they were having a real problem with retention. And they said, okay, we're gonna give everybody leather flying jackets, which seemed like a simple thing. So they did this, and, well, they said they were gonna do this. And then what they did, these were all junior officers they're gonna do this to, then they realized they didn't have enough money to give everybody a jacket. And so they said, well, what we're gonna do is we're gonna give them to the top people. So you get a big group of people, and they're younger, you know, they're all lieutenants, ensigns, lieutenants, whatever, flight guys, and everybody's, you know, just one big happy group. Well, now all of a sudden they come through and they start stratifying people, and they say, okay, these guys are the top 10, 15%, and they're gonna be the ones to get the jackets. So remember that the initial goal of this whole thing was to, you know, retain people, keep people in the service and flying, and what they actually did was told 85% of the people that, yeah, you're probably not going to go real far in this, because it gets more competitive for promotions. And people who want to get promoted, you need to be in the top 15% at some point in your career to get to that higher level. So anyway, they drove people out, and it's tough. I mean, you went from having a fairly cohesive, good group of folks who were doing a demanding job, but they enjoyed it, and now they're competitive and they're being difficult. I mean, that's the joke about being in the Navy, especially with these guys. You know, what's the difference between being in the Navy and being in prison? In the Navy, you have the additional fear of drowning. I mean, it's not a good life for some of those junior guys on the ship. So, let's look at this Hard Rock video. While that's getting started, pass these out. Does anybody manage a group of people? Do you have anybody have subordinates or any of that kind of stuff? Do scheduling? Not so much. Yeah.
Their operations strategy with competent, motivated people. Many organizations have demonstrated that competitive advantage in operations can be built through a good human resource strategy. At the Hard Rock Cafe, part of their mission is to offer the Hard Rock family a fun, healthy, and nurturing work environment to ensure the company's long-term success. Employees at the Hard Rock Cafe play a key role in this mission. They must create a dining experience that is authentic and memorable for today's experienced economy. As Jim Knight, manager of corporate training, knows, that experience is sort of like the employees themselves.
Yeah, I think when we start really looking at the types of people that we want to bring on board, it's kind of cool. You have sort of a catch-22 here where you really want bright, attractive, personable, self-motivated types of professionals. But then on the other hand, you're also looking for something different. I think people look for that when they go to Hard Rock. So you do want to be irreverent, kind of impatient, visual-oriented, long-haired, tattooed, fighting fierce freaks. If you can combine the two and you can get a really good product, you really talk about somebody who can make a difference.
Hard Rock has a pretty unique culture and work environment, which may explain why turnover of hourly employees is half the industry norm.
turnover is pretty low in our company compared to the rest of the industry. I don't think there's a silver bullet. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. You can probably start really just collectively listing the cool benefits that we have. You get to hang out and listen to rock and roll music. You get to work the way you want to. Again, if you embrace that individuality. There's great benefits package for staff level, which is pretty uncommon even in the restaurant industry. I think selfishly, we've got some pretty good basic standards for training. I think people really recognize that and want to stick around. Some great growth potential, internal promotions. And then if you can make it to 10 years, you get a Rolex watch. So that's usually, once you get past a couple of years here, you start really looking toward that as being a full reason to stick around.
Hard Rock has an employee bill of rights that helps promote a climate of a reasonable quality of work life with mutual commitment and trust. They also have a policy of hiring best qualified, not just best available.
When you look at the unemployment rate nationwide, and then you throw in the fact that there are a ton of places that you can go in the industry of work, people can pretty much get a job anywhere. I think when you start looking at quickly filling positions and just putting a body into the place, I think you're really maybe looking at a very short-term thinking. If you want some long-term results, you really want to spend quality time to find somebody who is truly qualified and you can validate it, because just doing the plug in the hole, people come out a lot better, and you're going to find that it'll show in the results. So that's qualified is certainly that we do, and we can afford to do that. There's a long line for people waiting to get inside the Hard Rock, and we can take our time here to select the basic people.
Once the right employee is found, it's off to class. Every employee, from the kitchen to management, takes training.
We do an entry-level management course called Rock 101, which is pretty exciting. If you go to, I think most companies are doing a corporate university type of thing, and I don't think we're any different in some of the things that we teach there. We do some technical, skill-driven classes, how to coach and develop people, how to handle sexual harassment complaints, how to live our mission and values, and go out and teach other people how to do that. Those are types of things I think you've seen a lot of conferences. But we also do some really good personal development. We've used in the past the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People from the Stephen Covey organization. We take the personal development and the professional development and we mix that together. We bring in people from around the world and we spend time together. It's pretty cool, and on top of that, you also sort of flavor with a heavy dose of rock and roll. It's a pretty special conference.
Company training is very specific. In addition to classes, employees learn from proprietary, job-oriented, interactive CDs covering topics such as service that rocks, respect, memorabilia, and Hard Rock's history, mission, and values. Welcome to the show. The training is so exceptional that Hard Rock has won a number of awards for its quality. But training is only one key part. Building a sense of community and team is another. The Hard Rock Cafe regularly sponsors events for charitable causes, such as the AIDS Foundation. Its employees are encouraged to get involved in their communities. And the company's employees have committed hours of volunteer time to charities such as Give Kids the World. Human resources strategies can be expensive, difficult to achieve, and hard to sustain. But as we've seen at Hard Rock Cafe, effective training and treating employees as unique individuals is not only good for business, it definitely rocks.
The way human resources and training has been positioned is really a support center for the people in the field. In that way, we've really become a strategic partner. It kind of reminds me of the Beatles lyrics.
This guy's still going on. There you go. All right. Oh, no. Don't make me. So what do you guys think? what do you think of their strategy and the way, you know, that whole thing? I don't know. I think after the movie, what was it, Office Space? You know, with the pieces of flair and all that, and the whole, hey, welcome to, it's like, tchotchkes, yeah, exactly. And so, I don't know, I could never do that kind of stuff. But another thing I did was, when I finished up at my undergrad, it was just kind of luck. I had this like kind of Joe job working at the information desk in University Union. Well, all of a sudden the supervisor, she had like some midlife and she went off to Scotland to get married to some whatever, and left nobody behind. So they hired me on as full up, university staff, parking permit, and the whole thing. And this kind of drove me to go fly fighters for a while, because I'm like, there's got to be more to life, because I thought this was the job I always aspired to, to be, because I was in charge of activities, I was in charge of everything for the university. And one of the things, though, was the information desk. And I'd worked out there myself, and now I'm hiring people to work out there. And I tell you what, you bring somebody new on there, and maybe they aren't the sharpest, but they're kind of like helpful and whatever. And then you get them out there after a while, and they're kind of like, they've got a lot of knowledge, but they really don't want to share it. And then pretty soon they're like, I just hate people. I just don't even want to see them. You know what I mean? And there was like this evolution they went through. I mean, you see it on the airlines, especially if you get a chance to fly international. Those are like the high dollar routes for the airlines, right? For flight attendants. Don't ever use the term stewardess. Anyway, your drinks will never be the same. I mean, they'll get even with you. So anyway, there's and I would never call them steward. I didn't mean it like that. But anyway, the flight attendants on some of these flights are very senior because they bid on those routes. And man, I mean, you talk about, you don't want to get on their bad side because they've been doing this perhaps maybe a little too long, and they're not bad people, but it just being with the public, and especially, public a lot of times it's difficult. They look at you and they aren't really even looking at you. They're thinking they've already, kind of quantified you as you're the guy who is such a jerk. You know what I mean? So in this Hard Rock Cafe thing, I think their example of giving them giving the servers a gold watch after 10 years of employment may not be, the best strategy in terms of for the restaurant itself. I mean, you may want some new folks coming in to kind of mix it up a little bit. I don't know. I mean, that's just one thought. I mean, different people, again, going back to the example in the military, the Air Force and the Navy are all about giving people bonuses to try and keep people in. Marine Corps, no. They want to retain 15% because they want fresh guys who can, be told to do something really stupid, really hard, and have it kind of be brand new. Were you a Marine? Yeah, there you go. So, I mean, you would not put up with that sort of stuff over and over again. And there's an Air Force guy be like, whoa, hold on, man. I thought we were talking, I'm not the 10th thing. I did that. I've got a little rank now. I'm not doing the 10th thing no more. You know what I mean? And the Marine Corps, they want a few, that 15% that they retain, but they don't want, and plus it's a great marketing thing. The Marines are not a big service, but in terms of Marines, and you wouldn't even be really referred to as a former Marine, right? Because you're always a Marine. Right. But anyway, there's all these Marines out there who hopefully did just the 3 years. They didn't get burned out. They had a good experience, saw a little bit of whatever, and now they're out there telling people, yeah, I had a great time in the Marines, but I did that. Whereas in the Air Force, you get guys above 15 years, and they're so close to retirement, they're, they may not be performing, but they sure as heck are not going to get out because they can see that retirement coming. So anyway, different employers will have different strategies. And I think in a situation like this, you might want to incentivize it some other way. You might almost want to offer perhaps some sort of college credit type thing, like an ROTC program, you know? You do 5 years with us and you get whatever, because clearly you don't want to be a server your whole life, you know what I mean? Or we're going to promote from within, you know, the top folks are going to go into management, and we, you know, like Walmart does that. I mean, I guess Walmart's not the biggest employer. But anyway, I do think, you know, one of the good things they do is their managers and all that stuff come from outside. The previous biggest employers was the Indian National Railroad and in the UK, the National Health Service, the NHS, because their health service is massive. So anyway, anybody got any feelings on that? I mean, you've been in those sorts of situations, right? Where, you know, you might have been good at first, but you see your performance is not what it used to be, but you like that steady paycheck, and you hate your job now, but it's a job, and you know what I mean? And from an operations management standpoint, you know, what are you doing? Are you, you know, if people are coming to Hard Rock to spend, you know, $15, $20 on a hamburger, they're looking for a little something more. I mean, they could go to whatever, Chopsky's or whatever. They can get that someplace else. So, and even more so, I you know, it'd be interesting, and not that I can't say I've ever even been to Hooters, but they've got to have some sort of strategy too, because that is kind of their business model. And if they're giving away, you know, gold watches to people who've been there 20 years, there's going to be a problem there. So anyway, that's other issues, and how they're going to work that out, I don't know. Anyway, like I say, the HR stuff is complex, and anything I said right then probably would have, you know, resulted in a lawsuit if any of you worked for me. So there you go. And I didn't even really go out on a limb, but even that conversation could be, you know, twisted and you know. So, any more? So on the actual question, did you get enough to answer the question?
That was on video.
Well, kind of, sort of. I mean, my thing is about this gold watch. I mean, what was the actual question? It was, yeah. I think that that's the problem you're going to have. You know, you're going to have a staff burnout thing. You don't think so? I mean, that whole bouncy, you know, hey, you know, and doing the, I think people are just going to get, there's going to be a few, you know, like that lady that's standing there with Elton John. Maybe she can pull it off for the whole time, but, you know, she's more unique. You don't want a whole staff of that, or it's just going to be, you know, that up-and-coming artist Prince or whatever they talked about in that other video, where the whole thing is just sort of a dated experience. All right.
Every job though, burnout.
Yeah, but I mean, that's why you know, you move up. You do something different, you know? And for a lot of folks, you know, I was unique in the fact that my background during my primary working years were military, so you moved every 3 years. And I tell you what, you know, it sounds like a hassle, but I was pretty much ready to go, you know? 3 years, and yeah, I'm kind of tired of this place and these folks, and move on. So it is tough. I don't know how some folks, you know, working in, say, a factory for 25, 30 years and just don't get, you know, just seriously, like the flight attendants, just surly and nasty, but that's a customer service thing. You know, I would not put someone in that sort of frontline customer service role for that long, because I think there's going to be bad consequences. Anyway, employment stability policies. So now you're saying, okay, you know, you want some capacity, some planning, you know, flexibility. How are you going to do this? You know, follow demand exactly. So this means you're going to kind of hire and fire as demand goes up and down. Matches direct labor cost to production. So, you know, it's not really me firing you. Sales are down this week, so your hours are, you know, 20. And if sales go back up next week, it's going to be, you know, 35, 40. And you know, just completely unapologetic and no, anyway, you can do that, but people are going to be going, you know what, I'm going to start looking at, you know, the whatever, the want ads, or not the want ads, but, you know, different opportunities, more network, really, for what you guys can do. Do you guys do LinkedIn at all? Yeah. I've got some friends who are big in it. It's, you know, it's kind of like a Facebook, but for for those types of things. What's that?
It could be used as an online resume.
Yeah. I've got nothing against it, and I know, but the traditional kind of want ads or things like Monster, they're just overwhelming. I don't know anybody's had any luck with that. There is a site called Indeed that's actually pretty decent, and a friend of mine recommended that to me because it conglomerates, it aggregates both private and government jobs together. But anyway, off the subject. So labor is treated as a variable cost in this sense. It's great from an accounting standpoint and from a variable cost standpoint. It matches everything up perfectly, but I don't think it's very realistic that you can do it. Hold employment constant, so maintains a trained workforce, minimizes the hiring, the training, all that kind of stuff. Labor is treated as a fixed cost. Again, is this any better? I mean, yeah, you're going to have happier, more stable employees, but your company's not going to be very agile and certainly not very efficient. If you just keep it constant, when you need more product, you're just going to take back orders and have dissatisfied customers, or if you don't have enough orders, then you're just going to be paying people to stand around. So anyway, you need to have some sort of flexibility and maybe some sort of hybrid type thing. This is the standard expectation, 5 8-hour days. You can also do what they call flex time and flexible work week and part time. So flex time, a lot of times this is, I don't want to be stereotypical here, but my sisters have done it during years when they were having children, and one of my sisters was an executive type person, and there was somebody else in her same situation, also had young kids, and they didn't want to get out of the labor pool. They just wanted to work half days, and so it's kind of a bargain for the employer, because you can't really work half days. You're kind of thinking about it all the time, and when you do work your 4 hours, you're really thinking about it. Whereas somebody does work for 8, they're kind of, well, I'm spending that first hour. Again, back to office space. What does it say you do here? Well, tell you the truth, So I think that works out. Flexible work week. This makes sense in a lot of places. The firm Booz Allen, they and any of these guys are in a big metropolitan area. If you can, and you're in this huge sort of traffic area, if you can work, 4 10-hour days and get your 40 hours, it's kind of a win-win, because 10 hours should put you on outside of the peak commute, and you're only having to do it 4 times versus 5 times. So that's kind of a win-win if it works. And you can even do, I have a friend in town, she's a nurse, she works 40 hours, but she does 3 12s and then a small shift. So anyway, that stuff can work out. But again, it has to do with matching the employer's needs. The other thing with this too is you've heard all these things where they had, oh yeah, with technology you can work from anywhere. Well, that was a trend that's in decline now. Yahoo was the one who just said, okay, no more of this. This isn't working out for us. So anyway, Yahoo went from being kind of a really not, anything close to Google, to where now their stock, at least stock prices, is coming way up this year since they instituted this new policy. And then HP this week now also said no more of this, telecommuting stuff. They're saying for innovation's sake, people being together, there's that's part of it. So anyway, it changes. It's based on the company. The part-time thing, again, I don't want to get political here, but there is a push right now to get people below 30 hours because you don't have to pay them the health care issues. So it just, for the employer, they're just like, if I can avoid all these headaches, I'll just keep people at 20 whatever hours, 28 hours, and like it or not, that's just the way the game's being played. I don't, again, not to get political, but please.
The worst one is when I worked for a pottery farm, they hire you off as casual, which is anywhere from 0 to 30 hours. And it changes basically after the management will get their set 40 and depending on sales. they get basically their on-call shift.
But you know, what I'd say to that, though, is they think they're getting, you know, a good deal, but there's a perception in your mind, I'm kind of getting screwed here. And the fact that you used to work for Pottery Barn and you don't work for them anymore, I mean, granted, they aren't up here, but just the same, you know, an accountant may think, hey, that we're you know, getting something for nothing. We're maximizing these people, but if your turnover is such, you know, if the better people are like, because again, military example, they said, oh, we're going to have a selective early out for folks because we got too many people. Well, all the people who are like, you know what, I can make it in the private sector, or I want to go back to school, or I want to do something, the sharp people, they're like, yeah, and they jump out and they take the bonus money, and what's left? Kind of the worthless and weak. I mean, this happened in sorry, again, if anybody, no, you guys all got up. But anyway, there was a thing, and I was flying F4, so it was like, early 90s, and it was just, I mean, you walk into a place, you're like, really? You're the guy who's here now? And we had a guy who used to crawl under his desk. He had some issues. He was still in the service, but I mean, that was his reaction when he got stressed. He'd go up in a little fetal position, and he was sort of checked out now and then. And it's like, wow. So we're cutting down, but you're the guy who's remaining. I mean, he had issues that needed to be dealt with somehow, but from the military perspective, it was off. So, yeah, but the whole healthcare thing, either way, however you feel about it, I would not get too rattled about it because nobody supports the, you know, you got the Republican side who's clearly against it, and then you got the liberal side that wants single payer. So nobody wants this sort of in-between situation that they're trying to purport. So I wouldn't get too wrapped up about it because nothing is going to stay the way it currently is. I don't know. Anyway, job classification rules. This, you know, these sound like sort of union type things where, you know, who can do what, when they can do it. This happened, and again, they even cite the whole union contract. Back in the days, you know, you had brakemen, you had firemen on trains, you know, and they had to stay around even though they had converted the diesel locomotive a long time ago. Well, we used to have a fireman back when they were coal-fired or wood-fired or whatever, way, way back. And, you know, we aren't going to put that guy out of a job. So there's still going to be a person in that position. Or I saw it a lot with stage crews working concerts. You know, you'd have electricians and stage guys. And the stage guy could move everything around on the stage for the band, but he couldn't touch the cord because that required an electrician. It's like, dude, it's a power cord. But anyway, they were all IATSE guys, and they couldn't do it. So you may be in that sort of environment at some point. But it definitely reduces or restricts your flexibility. Job design, you can make things better, and this is what we were talking about, you know, in terms of if you get somebody who's getting burned out or preemptively, you know, you don't want to get them in the burnout phase, you want to move them on, you know, job specialization, job expansion, and the whole psychological element of it. Self-directed teams, motivation incentive system. But again, you know, be very careful before you start monkeying around with stuff because, you know, these are literally people's lives, and if things go badly, they will get even with you in terms of, you know, it's not going to be like whatever, they can just walk, and now you're stuck. You lose a valuable employee by doing something that caused them to be, you know, very unmotivated needlessly. So, labor specialization, there's a history, again, we aren't going to talk about names and all that other stuff, but they figured out, you know, just some scientific research in terms of what takes what to get a job done. And there still are books, you know, that tell what it takes to, in terms of developmental dexterity and other things. The F4, for example, you can be missing 2 digits on one hand, because we had a guy who supposedly injured himself so he wouldn't have to deploy, and they found a regulation in the book and said, no, you must go. So anyway, it's all quantified out there in terms of jobs and what it takes to get a certain job performing. Job expansion, adding more variety. intended to reduce boredom. So you can do a lot of things, you know, rotation, enrichment, employee empowerment, enlargement. You know, but again, it's not a one-size-fits-all type thing. You don't want to be pushing people into things that they're not comfortable with. So this is definitely a hands-on kind of management thing. Job enlargement. So this poor guy, he's stuck doing just one, you know, soldering these 6 little resistors, and now he gets to do the labels and then the other things. So yeah, this guy, you know, this will keep him interested till lunch, and then he's going to kind of figure this one out. You know, I think a better example would be maybe upwardly mobile type policies where guys can get a little bit more exposure and do a greater variety of tasks. This Hawthorne study thing, this was really funny. What they did in this case was that they had a good idea. They said, well, you know, there's a psychological element here with lighting in a factory type facility. So what we're going to do is we're going to increase the lighting in the facility, and we're going to see what effect that has on production. So they increased the lighting, and guess what? Productivity went up. Okay, so they're like, wow, this is fantastic. Increased lights, you know, increases production. So they were all happy. Study's over, and then they reduced the lighting. And actually the production started to taper. They reduced the lighting, and production went back up. It spiked again. And so what they found out was that they were basically kind of amateurs in this whole process, because the psychological element was much different. It was more that the people, they knew they were being measured, and they also responded to change. You know, when they were just kind of lulled in the same way, everyday type thing, the production just sort of stayed flat or even declined. When the lights got brighter and there were people around measuring their productivity, all of a sudden their productivity went up. You know, that's a direct correlation. And then when they changed the lights back down, again, just the change of the lights had an effect on the folks. We're right at the hour. Let's just take a few minute break and come back.
We're up here. It's very family friendly. Nothing ever goes on.
Just make the minimum 37 pieces of fruit.
There we go.
Stan, you told me to wear 37 pieces of flair like you're a pretty boy over there, Brian. Why don't you just make the minimum 37 pieces of flair?
You know the guy there that she's talking to, you know who that is? That's what's his name? Mike Judge. The guy.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He was the writer of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Of the whole thing. Office Space,
King of the Hill.
Game and Beavis and Butthead, all that other stuff. Had to be there. You don't know Beavis and Butthead? I'm not going to defend it. It's not a great show, believe me. Not one of my favorites, but it was significant. But I mean, what an Office Space, that's pure. I mean, we could just watch that movie and call it good for everything tonight. But anyway. You never saw Office Space?
I'm getting around to it.
Oh my gosh. It's that good, yeah. The Bobs. I love that show. Anyway. Oh, I think we got the recorder on too, so good. Okay. Here's the job continuum. Okay, this is how it should work. You know, specialization, enlargement, enrichment, empowerment, self-directed teams. But I mean, you've seen folks you know, folks you went to high school with, you know, they don't progress on this chart sometimes, you know. Some guys, whatever, marijuana being what it is, and Nintendo, or not Nintendo, but other stuff now, but they're happy to sit on the couch and just whatever. And it all works out. I mean, it's a capitalist type society. At some point, somebody's going to need to clean a pool and find that like challenging work, and it all works out. So, in the big picture, not everybody is going to follow that continuum. They're going to stop somewhere in there, and that's fine. But for people who are getting burned out, and I don't, burned out in terms of job, not in terms of lifestyle, that's not going to work. So, self-directed teams. Remember when we watched that thing on quality, and the guy had the hotel, the Ritz-Carlton, and he was talking about self-directed teams and how they gave people that sort of responsibility, and for some of them it was a bit too much for them and all the rest of that. This really is. This is you as the manager turning over a bit of your authority to the folks and letting them kind of, have some autonomy, with the hope that they're going to take a little bit more pride in their work and everything else and generate a better project. Anyway, but meet individuals' psychological needs. It does give people who are, and most people are capable of it, and most people, that's the only way they're going to avoid the whole job burnout phase is by being more involved and not just being told what to do. Especially, when you come in as a younger person, a college grad, and somebody's been doing this for a long time, there's going to be some tension in a lot of those situations. But if somebody's got an autonomous team, and it can work well, or it can also be difficult. You just got to assess it. Other things about self-directed teams, obviously the composition of the team, the personalities, and all that other stuff. And then if they're going to be doing a little bit more work, there's probably going to be anticipation. There's going to be some sort of financial, non-financial reward. But the supervisor must release control. Now, this is kind of a tough thing. You can't necessarily put the genie back in the bottle. Once you say, yeah, we trust you, you're good enough, and go ahead, unless you're willing to really commit to that, you may not want to do it, because to say, nah, you're going to be back under my thumb here, and we aren't going to give you that free rein anymore. So, again, most of these decisions, they seem somewhat simple, but in practice, because of the human element, they're much more complex. Benefits of teams and expanded design, improve quality of work life, improve satisfaction, increase motivation. It all looks like, upside stuff. Lower turnover, reduce absenteeism, that's all good. But the drawbacks, a little bit more cost if you're incentivizing these people financially. And then, again, the pothead kind of guys, some people prefer the simpler jobs. Higher wages for greater skills, smaller labor pool, and they're more highly trained. So, anyway, there's limits on both sides. Average annual training hours. You can see that in the U.S. they're saying it's only 7 hours. A lot of times, though, when they offer these little snippet type things like a USA Today thing with no background to it, are they talking formal training, and maybe in the U.S. they're doing more on-the-job training, or who's doing the counting, or what's their agenda, what's their motive? Is this the person who wants to come into your company and do more training? You can better believe that they're going to produce a study that shows that they're in great demand. So this is the really tricky part, the motivation and incentive systems. Different people will respond to different things. Some people want to work on commission. Some people want no part of it. Some people want a steady income. Some people, you put them on commission and you incentivize them like that, and sometimes it has a negative effect. Or just because you pay somebody more money, you don't always get more output out of it. It's complex. There's very few linear relationships. Does anybody have any exposure to this, where you're nodding your head? No? Or you've seen it? And how they respond. Yeah, more complex. And certain people, profit sharing, if you're, a younger guy who's not really thinking 20, 30 years down the road, a bunch of stock, I'd rather have, some cash now as opposed to stock later. Incentive plans based upon production rates. Now, all of a sudden, your production rate numbers were fairly reliable and accurate. Now you see there's some gamesmanship going on, people trying to meet goals, and, it can get complex. Knowledge-based systems reward for knowledge and skills. Anyway, you need to motivate people, but you need to realize that you need to do a little bit of study on this, and especially in terms of compensation. And I can tell you for a fact, there's studies that have shown that the pay level and the work output, there's not much correlation there, and also some of the incentivizing systems, not the same. For me, I was actually, one of the things I was looking for in real estate, what drew me to it was the fact that there was commission, and coming from an environment where you get the same paycheck regardless of the job you do. I was looking for a little bit of incentive, but that was perhaps too much incentive, because now it's like you've got all these office expenses, all this overhead for all your real estate things, and if you don't produce, you're not only not making money, you're losing money in a big way. There's also a bunch of stuff that can be done in terms of ergonomics, and this is easy stuff, or relatively, compared to the psychological element. You've seen that with the advent of carpal tunnel and all the other problems that have been caused by some of the technology, that people are much more attuned to it. Even back in the days of the green cathode ray, it's not exactly high-tech IT stuff, but they're at least thinking about it in terms of placement. But the whole field of ergonomics, people respond. People, you can get fatigued just by vibration and things like that. People don't realize the effect of noise levels and other things. We had a guy, another Air Force story, Speedy Gonzalez. Speedy, on the top of his helmet, he flew B-52s, the Buck, right? Old, ancient airplane, vibrates a lot. Well, Speedy had this little hook on the top of his helmet, and he was an EWO, he's an electronic warfare officer, so it meant that he only worked about an hour during that 8-hour mission. And so Speedy did other things. He cooked, he made food for the crew during the flight and all that. But the other thing was this hook on the top of his helmet. What he would do is he would get a bungee cord, and he would hook it on up above his workstation. He'd hook it onto the top of his helmet at the proper thing, because if you lay your head against anything on that old airplane, it would just rattle and vibrate. And this way, he was like one of those bobble-headed toms, just snoozed away with his head just floating around suspended. So it could happen. So anyway, ergonomics, there is a lot to it, and again, it gets back to the lighting, heat, noise. You make things pleasant for workers, and you'll get more out of them. So, reducing allergens, other things, also helpful. Airline, yeah, all this stuff, I just kind of hit on it, but yeah, it'll take you out. And some of the nasty environments, in the desert with the humidity and stuff, you're on these, I forget what they call it, FITS, Fighter Index of Thermal Stress. And then, based upon the temperature, you can work for, 20 minutes, but then you got to go sit in the shade for, an hour or something. It was just ridiculous. So, anyway, but it's proven that stuff can have a serious effect on you. This is kind of sad. This is the recommended levels of illumination, and obviously somebody who worked in an office interior or doing an assembly task, came up with this, but they kept themselves in fairly, reasonable light levels, exacting tasks, and these are all based on lumens, right? So a certain number of lumens. These people in the warehouses in the hallway, they can get by with like 10, 25 lumens. So you can just sit there in that dark all day, like the dude with the stapler in Office Space again, down in the bowels of the organization. But people have gone through. Because people want to make the human factor stuff. They want to make it very, quantified. It's really a more of a qualitative task. But they're saying, okay, in this type of environment, this is how much light you get, and not pleasant. For me, like working in an area with fluorescent lights, it just drives me nuts, especially when you have one that flickers. I mean, that can, I don't know, do huge things. I much prefer natural light or incandescent, so. Same thing with decibel levels, noise, you know. Jet's taking off 120 decibels and very quiet, so. The other thing about this too is, again, most companies are going to be, well, in any sector, private or public sector, are going to be very aware of this stuff because there's people who are going to have, they're going to have injuries or disabilities caused by these noise levels. They're going to lose some hearing after a while. So, if for no other reason, to protect yourself down the road, because you're going to be held responsible. Okay, so now we get back into the whole analysis bit of looking at human activities and how they're accomplished. So it's going to be the same type of thing with the flow charts and the rest of that, and you're going to basically map out people's motions. You know, it's like the old efficiency experts or the Bobs in Office Space, where they sit there and go through and they analyze the different tasks that people do and what they do throughout their day. So that's still an element. Tied into this thing too is there's some kind of no-brainer things that can be done very easily in a workspace, especially like in a noisy environment. And the more visual type things, it costs very little, but the benefits are huge. So in a factory type setting, if you can have andons or K-bands or different things we'll talk about, visual devices to communicate, it's just far easier. You know, it's makes things very little chance for error and effective communications. So, but that's what they're talking about in a visual workspace, to share information quickly and accurately. So, if it's a big project, if you keep people aware of where you are, if you've got a certain production level you're trying to hit, an abstract number is not too useful, but a big bar that shows how close you're going and what your daily goal is, that might be useful in terms of performance. Housekeeping, again, the silly little tent things we're all used to in the fast food restaurants. When somebody spills something, it's kind of silly, but you have a couple people fall down and all of a sudden it's pretty serious. So different ways to visually do that. And then you kind of come up with these sort of no-brainer type things, keep things organized. Obviously, we're all familiar with how silverware will go, and there's one of those performance type meters. That's an andon on the left. This other thing, if you're doing a just-in-time type facility, and do we need to bring more boxes out here? No, because it's not to the reorder point. The reorder point would be that line. So you would know that in part C there, until it gets to the purple line, you've still got enough. Bins, performance specifications. Anyway, it's far easier to communicate graphically with folks than to try and do it all verbally. Historical experience. Again, this is back to the analysis part. So, you basically look at how it was done, data available from before. Again, they're saying it's not recommended. They would prefer an original type study, obviously, because they're in the business of doing studies. So, anyway, time study. This would, you basically just go with a stopwatch and roll loose. They've got the efficiency expert, they're trying to get Lucy or whatever to do whatever her task is, and they're measuring her every step of the way. How do we go backwards? There we go. Time study. Again, they have a predilection for math. So some of the times recorded to perform each event and number of observations, and that equals average observed time. And then attach a performance factor rating to it. Anyway, I'll just tell you in comparison how you're doing to the standard time. one way to measure performance. Rest allowances, here they're getting kind of extreme, 4 to 7% for restaurant or restroom, water fountain, etc. Daily allowance, fatigue allowance. This would just get very tedious to work in that sort of environment, where, hey, you exceeded your, whatever standard today. It's like, well, yeah, I had some bad chili or something. I mean, this is kind of silly if people don't like to be measured quite that precisely. People would rather have goals set that, in essence, measure this indirectly, It's like I always say, I get paid for what I know, not necessarily what I do, you know what I mean? The fact that I'm not there every second of the day, grade me by my output, not by my, show up time. I did have a guy like that. I know a guy we worked with, and this guy would religiously, he'd come in there from 8 to 5, and he'd do nothing but surf the internet and ESPN all day. And, he had whatever. For me, there's no job satisfaction because there's no output. I mean, the hours worked, or I don't really care. I mean, I know there's an expectation, there's a certain time to show up, but I would much rather be graded on results than hours. That's like, you've got friends who study and they say, oh, I studied 5 hours for that test. Well, if you read all the wrong stuff, I mean, the hours that's not a very good measure, Did you learn? Did you pass the test? I mean, grading by results, not by hours. But anyway, that's more of a self-directed thing. Predetermined time standards. This is where they've decided, it takes this long to do this, and you're going to be graded against that standard. Again, in a highly, manufacturing job, they're putting the irons together. Not a pleasant place to work. And some of that manufacturing that's all moved overseas, so be it. So here in a big push, in a salesperson type thing, like for example, I got to go down to Florida for this meeting. You know how much time I'm going to actually spend in the meeting? Not nearly as long as I'm going to spend, getting there and doing all this stuff, and then it's a one-day kind of thing. Seems like a whatever, but in a time study, it would not look good. But to go there for once every couple of years for a face-to-face with the people I work with is important. So there's some value in that. And it can't be accomplished with a video teleconference. People will always say, oh, you can just, it's, a lot of times it's just not the same. So, this is how they've broken it down for a salesman. They're looking at, his actual work time versus everything else, the paperwork, telephone sales, whatever. There's, sales in person, 20%. So 1/5 of the time he's actually doing it. But, it's not realistic to think that he'd be doing that 100%, because then all the paperwork, he wouldn't travel, he wouldn't get anything else done. So again, it gets back to this sort of design efficiency and actual efficiency. Here's assembly line. Again, those guys, yeah, they don't have a travel allowance. They don't have those other allowances. 67% of their time, in this case, should be productively making product, whatever that is. All right, so we kind of breezed through a lot of things tonight, but these are chapter 10 numbers, or not chapter 10, but 10th edition numbers. So the slides will be out there again. Anybody got any questions on anything we talked about tonight, though? Not so much? No.